Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are happy to organize this event at the European Council of Civil Engineers, where we'll be discussing engineering in the new European Bauhaus framework and transforming this and reframing it within from theory to practice. When we were discussing this event, one thing that came to mind was the words of Henry Wotton. And in 1624, he had published a book called The Elements of Architecture, where he discussed three prerequisites for something to be efficient. He talks about firmness, commodity, and delight. He defined firmness as something which is stable and it is not going to fall over, safe. He discussed commodity in terms of function and comfort, ventilation, light, active safety, and delight in the aesthetic, the appearance of the project. And this can't be more true, although I would, in today's world, add sustainability in its broadest terms, including the 17 UN Sustainability Development Goals of diversity, equity, inclusion, economy, and the environment. So basically the 3 Ps, the planet, people, and the profit. And this wonderfully links into the Bauhaus initiative, where the mantra is beauty, sustainable, and together. So aesthetic, sustainability, and inclusion, still very similar words as to what have been, what was happening in 1624, just a reinterpretation or a reframing of it. And therefore today we're looking at the bridge between the world of science and the world of technology, art and culture, while keeping people at the forefront of whatever we do, of this initiative. Today's event will be focusing on the role of the civil engineer within this framework and how the skills can be brought into best use. And also, of course, the profession intersecting with other stakeholders within a project of civil engineering. And they could be architects, urban designers, social scientists, and the list goes on. We will be unpacking topics such as the voice of civil engineers and the advocacy that they bring in high-level discussions in forums with policymakers. We will be talking about the benefits to the environment and the economy when civil engineers are involved from the beginning of the process. And perhaps here we can link in to the recent increase of cost in construction materials and how civil engineers can aid in understanding efficiency. And therefore, really, we can continue discussing the pushing of the boundaries of design, because civil engineers need to challenge themselves now more than ever, and we would not be able to do this without the technologies, innovation, and different design approaches. On this note, I will now leave the floor to Engineer Andreas Brudner, the President of the European Council of Civil Engineers, for his opening words.
Thank you, Janet. Dear lecturers, dear colleagues and participants, a warm welcome to our event, Engineering the New European Bauhaus, Reframing the Bauhaus Framework from Theory to Practice. And thank you for your interest. Today we have 3 excellent speakers who will share their views on the topic of the new European Bauhaus. The new European Bauhaus initiative is self-defined as a creative and interdisciplinary initiative to connect the European Green Deal with our daily lives and experiences. The new European Bauhaus initiative calls on all of us to imagine and build together a sustainable and inclusive future that is beautiful for our eyes, minds, and souls. Beautiful are the places, practices, and experiences that are enriching, inspired by art and culture, responding to needs beyond functionality, sustainable, in harmony with nature, the environment, and our planet, inclusive, encouraging a higher dialogue across cultures, disciplines, genders, and ages. This sounds rather theoretical, and the goal of our event is to reframe the new European Bauhaus to a more practical side. I think as civil engineers, we will be a vital part in this reframing process, as the European Green Deal will transform the EU into a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy, ensuring no net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050, economic growth decoupled from resource use, no person and no place left behind. The European Green Deal is also our lifeline out of the COVID-19 pandemic. 1/3 of the 1.8 trillion euro investments from the Next Generation EU Recovery Plan and the EU's 7 years budget will finance the European Green Deal. The tasks involved are manifold and can be solved primarily by us engineers. Now I am already looking forward to the presentations and the subsequent discussion, and I wish you an interesting event. Thank you, Jeanette, for moderating, and I pass back to you.
Thank you, Andreas, for kicking off our session and already touching on some important issues in the profession. Before I invite my first speaker, some housekeeping. So the running order of today's event will be starting off with the presentations by our guest speakers. We'll then have a Q&A session that will follow at the end of the 3 presentations, so right at the end, where we also be joined by members of the ECHE Executive Board. The questions may be sent either using the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform or later by raising your hand, where Ms. Karanasiu will be unmuting you to join the discussion. The discussion panel will then ensue until around 7 o'clock CET. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, Ms. Carluccio. Her mission is to mobilize the engineering community to act on sustainability, resilience, and climate change impacts through infrastructure. Her role at the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure is to provide consultation for disaster risk management and resilience, which feeds into the Sendai framework. She attempts to understand who engineers should be collaborating with, what is the role, and where do they see the role, and where they see capacity gaps within infrastructure and infrastructure projects. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Jeanette, and it's a delight to be here today. I will be sharing my slides. Let me see if that works. Can you see my slide? Presentation mode. Okay, great. Okay, so today I'd like to spend my time sharing my thoughts on the role of engineers and how I see this in the need for change and the new European Bauhaus that I must admit I was not aware of before this webinar, but I read with great interest and inspired me really, I think, in the preparation of this presentation. So starting from these 3 words that we already heard about, but for me, I kind of want to hold them in my mind, you know, as I go through the presentation, and they really informed my ideas, I think, as I go through them. So let's just hold them in our minds. So if we, it's a beautiful vision, but to truly achieve it, I think that requires consideration of the whole system. So we need to be thinking about the social, the natural, technological, the built environment, and then suddenly we as engineers, we need to be collaborating with so many different stakeholders and so many different disciplines. So, and we need to be thinking about how to make the built environment more sustainable, equitable, resilient, safe, climate compatible, inclusive, and the list goes on. So it's a complex challenge. And we also need to bear in mind that we are living in a time of complex challenges: climate change, urbanization, globalization, technological disruption. So all of this is a systemic challenge that requires a holistic solution. So, but Paula, colleague from Europe, will tell us about examples of how really to use a holistic approach in projects. So that she will do that beautifully afterwards. But I'll just keep it a bit more high level on the role of engineers in my presentation, and also want to note that when we think about the wide-ranging technical and non-technical issues in how we think about implementing the new solutions and new interventions in the built environment, or if we retrofit or refurbish existing assets, for example, we need to be aware of the conflict that sometimes arises when we want to meet all of these requirements. You know, it's not, and we are adopting a holistic approach. This is something that actually has in itself some conflict. There might have some conflict, some trade-offs that we need to be bearing in mind as we think it through. So one thing that came to mind when preparing this presentation was the last Brunel lecture by the Institution of Civil Engineers, and that really made me think of the word together in those 3 words. And so it's the 21st century leadership is partnership. That was the theme of the lecture. And it's a busy infographic that kind of was used to advertise the lecture, but has got lots of good good concept and elements really in there. You know, like engineers, we play a big role. We are problem solvers, but we need to implement at pace and at scale. We are trusted professionals, so we got that credibility. But actually, very importantly, we need to be thinking about how we can better collaborate and build those partnerships beyond our profession. So working more with policymakers, the government, business leaders, local communities. I would also add investors. So we play a big role, but you know, like we need to be reaching out. We need to come out of our shell more. And something that I wanted to note while I'm on this, and by the way, this is available online if you want to listen to this lecture. It was very interesting, in fact, by Seth Schultz, who's the CEO now of Resilience Rising. The Brunel lecture is basically gets it's got different, gets replicated in different regions, at least the past version of it. And in Europe, the key points that the European stakeholders raised, European engineers, and it might be some of you participated to that event, was around repurposing, in terms of repurposing and retraining engineers. And then really filling that skills gap that the sector needs to fill in so that it can tackle challenges such as climate change, because that was the focus of the lecture. So, and the priority for discussed at that event in terms of skills gap were around energy efficiency, renewable electricity, decarbonizing industry, carbon sequestration, with infrastructure resilience underpinning everything. And that's another point. I think it was of interest in the discussion, that we engineers need to be unlocking our creativity again. So in particular, when it comes with the huge, tremendous potential that digital technologies give us in terms of the ability to just push really the boundaries of our solutions. So that's kind of like coming out of that shell where at least, some might think that engineers are conservative and inflexible. Maybe not all of us are, but that's the perception. So in terms of how engineers can help, and Jeanette, I think you have already hinted to this, but for me, it's a very simple, beautifully simple way to just say, how can we really help, and what else, what more should we do? So traditionally, engineers are called in at design stage where the scope is already locked in. Potential for change and innovation is relatively, it's still there, but could be a lot more. And so they're called in to do the project right. But what we should be doing a lot more is have a say and influence what the right projects are. So in this sense, you know, engineers really need to come to the table with policymakers and investors when they are making the decisions on, even if there should be a project in the first place. So whether there should be a hard structural solution, or actually then something else is required, then we don't need to build new. We can repurpose, we can diversify, we can retrofit or renew or expand something that exists. So something that is beautifully simple, and I think, you know, it really sticks with people. So engineers traditionally come in to do the right project, but really we should have a say on what the right projects are. And this is, by the way, it's a policy statement by the American Society of Civil Engineers called The Role of Civil Engineering in Sustainable Development. And what I also like about this is that on both sides, do the right project and do the project right, there is an emphasis on stakeholders. And that's crucial, I think, you know, thinking about it together again, the inclusion of all voices in the decision making of what the right project might be, but also in how the project might be done right. So I came across this recently, and it's from the International Engineering Alliance. And it was an exercise that was supported by the World Federation of Engineering Organization and UNESCO, thinking about the competencies how the competencies might be changing in the future for engineers. And I think, you know, obviously we need to be moving from the well-defined, we are into the uncharted territory of complex engineering problems, which for engineers is actually probably exciting, you know, to be tackling complex engineering problems. But I think, you know, the complexity, and then I should also say the uncertainty of what we're going to be dealing with in the future makes the complex engineering problem even more complex. And I think we need to be stretching a lot of these attributes that they've identified in terms of competencies. I think, you know, they need to be stretched. So, for example, in the depth of knowledge, and this is important. So, our as engineers, our deep technical knowledge is our wealth. So we should be holding on to that, because this is what makes us, and this is really pixie dust for other stakeholders trying to understand how we might implement the solutions. So that doesn't change. We shouldn't be feeling that we are obsolete just because we're saying that our role is changing. So our deep technical knowledge is our wealth, and we need it. We need it to be able to find, you know, to stretch ourselves and push for new solutions. But then the familiarity of issues now is just, we are in uncharted territories many times. And also in terms of interdependence. So as I said, we need to be considering the whole system. System thinking is something that is everyone talks about, and it's not very easy to be doing in practice. So understanding how all the different, you know, parts of the systems interrelate, and, you know, where to intervene, and what might happen if in terms of cascading impacts if something goes wrong at that one point. And then, you know, range of conflicting requirements. This is something else that I mentioned before, is in all the different broad range of things that we need to be taking into consideration, there are always going to be some trade-offs and some conflict that we need to resolve. One around depth of analysis required, and this links to the point of technology and the new approaches and innovation. And I think Professor Lagaros is going to be talking about applying structural optimization, so pushing the boundaries of an analysis approach to then deliver something that is new, has got a holistic approach, and is also sustainable. And then the extent of applicable codes. I mean, now this is another sticking point. You know, they tend to be compliance led, and this is no longer something that is acceptable. We just need to be going beyond the codes, and we need to kind of jump into the deep end. And I know this is for engineers something that is very uncomfortable. And then finally, the stakeholders' involvement, and again, back to the together, to being inclusive, so that we can then better understand how to tackle equity issues or diversity, including diversity in our thinking, in our solutions. So just, and then quickly on this, that's something that made me also think about the collaboration. So as we think, or said many times already, we need to be pushing our boundaries, and pushing the boundaries of collaboration. I think this is also something that I think the engineers, civil engineers in the future should be doing a lot more of. So we are used to the multidisciplinarity. This is something that we've done in our projects many times. And in this case, we collaborate with the other disciplines, but our knowledge structure doesn't change. We collaborate, but then, like the disciplines kind of remain separate. And when we move on to be interdisciplinary, that's where more integration happens. And then we are then into the realm of co-creation. But I would argue that for tackling those really complex systemic challenges, we really need to go a step further, which is to be transdisciplinary, to where we kind of really going beyond the boundaries of the disciplines. And then also embrace, and this is not just engineering disciplines, we are now, I think, in a transdisciplinary environment. That's where we co-create solutions with other groups. So academia, civil society, private sector, etc. And then on the pushing the boundaries, finally, I think he said three things. I already touched upon two of them. So going beyond compliance in the standards. The thing about the going beyond compliance is that it takes time to develop new standards or to update the standards, and we don't really have the time to wait, particularly when it comes to climate change, dealing and tackling climate change. So I think we need to be equipping our fellow practitioners with the guidance and tools that can make a difference now. And for example, with the impetus to decarbonize, the standards and guidance that fully integrate the mitigation and adaptation aspect are really needed now urgently. So we don't have the luxury of time to be waiting for policies for requirements to be enshrined in policy or for standards to be developed. Then we should try and use best practice guidance as much as possible and share. Be generous. I think, I've heard this before from a colleague from Europe. She said, Jo da Silva, she says it many times, experts need to be generous with their expertise, because it's the time to be generous and to just allow everyone to take action. And then I will touch upon the upskilling and capacity building in a little while, but final point is outreach and advocacy. Again, Jeanette, I think you mentioned the advocacy and outreach. This is something that engineers don't do a lot of, or at least, that I've seen so far. And this is something that my organization, the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, is one of the key pillars that we're going to be doing. So, and I will tell you about it if time. So just to share a few interesting points from a recent project that we did. In my introduction, Jeanette rightly said that we're doing a project that feeds into the midterm review of the Sendai framework, which is the global framework for disaster risk reduction and resilience. And so since it's a 2015-2030 framework, they're taking stock midway. And they've got different groups and different member countries feeding into that midterm review. And the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, or ICSI, we've been asked to try and collate views from the engineering communities on the implementation of on disaster risk management and resilience. But as part of that consultation that we launched, we also asked our respondents globally to comment on their views on how engineers are doing in terms of implementation of sustainable development. So one of the questions was, how familiar are you with the SDGs? And the good news is that 82% of the respondents they thought that they were reasonably knowledgeable or more or expert in the SDGs, and this is a great news, I think, for our profession. The other interesting point, though, was that other frameworks, such as the Sendai framework, was actually a lot less well known, although it's quite important if you think about it in terms of implementation of disaster risk management. And this is not to say that engineers don't do disaster risk management and resilience, they just don't really do it necessarily in alignment with that framework, or they don't really know of that framework. Another question that we asked was where they thought engineers could contribute the most in the implementation of sustainable development goals. And there's no, I guess there's no surprise that some of them, you know, they're quite obvious. The cities goal, the infrastructure, the water, the energy, climate action, they're all scored very high. But there were some that are quite low, and I think, you know, that's an interesting early data point that perhaps we can just think about in terms of how engineers don't see, I mean, they all see that the engineers can contribute to all of them, so which is great. But there are some of them, such as, for example, reduce inequality, or even gender equality, or no poverty, where engineers, they see that they think there's less for them to do in that space. But perhaps, you know, like perhaps it's something that we should be thinking more about. What else can we do? And then in terms of competencies, we listed some topic areas of potential new competencies or competencies for engineers that we think will be needed in the future. And this is the, again, initial findings from our project, and we will want to build on it some more, because it's important to understand where engineers see themselves, they need some more further education or upskilling. So it's no surprise that some of the climate change adaptation and resilience scored quite high, because we were tackling experts in those fields. But it's quite surprising, at least surprised me, that the highest was the inclusive stakeholder engagement. The engineers thought that they were quite proficient in doing that. And the lowest was the use of advanced technologies, such as artificial intelligence. There's one, so the systems approach is scored higher than I thought, because that in my mind, this is something that we really need to be upskilling ourselves into. And there was one that was integration of social, economic, and environmental outcomes, so the outcome-led design, that kind of scored like midway. So then moving to my own organization, and just to kind of briefly tell you a bit more. So all the concepts I've been talking about, they're all sort of part of our theory of change. So the engineering community has got the technical expertise, we've got the credibility, we've got the solutions, and then there are policymakers and owners and operators that need in an urgent demand for those solutions. And so our organization is kind of bridging those two. So engineers cannot be doing that on their own. And as part of our organization, although we've got a very strong engineering core, there's also a city network, the Global Covenant of Mayors, on our board, and there's the private sector, because we believe the private sector has got like the speed, it's got the I suppose, you know, the ability to do innovation at pace. And so we've got a private sector network on our board as well, called Resilience Fest. And so what we do, we really want to mobilize engineers globally to work on sustainability, resilience, and climate change for infrastructure. And we do this through thought leadership, through advocacy, through running global campaigns to monitor progress that the global engineering community is doing, and then finally through projects, demonstrator projects. Now, one of the things that we're doing, and I wanted to advertise to this group, is called Race to Resilience. You might know about this initiative. Was launched alongside the Race to Zero, which is a sibling campaign, last year ahead of COP 2026. And so ICSI is one of the partner initiatives of the Race to Resilience, and we are the only initiative that focuses on infrastructure and engineering. So what we do as part of that, we want to really showcase what the engineering community is doing to tackle climate resilience and infrastructure through collating examples of projects that have as key objective, or one of the key objectives, implementing climate resilience. And I suppose an organization can join Race to Resilience, engineering firms, infrastructure owner operators, but also civil society and academia organizations are working with engineers. And we're working on a track to get individual engineers to be part of the initiative themselves, to inspire them to take action. An example, I don't know how I'm doing with time, Jeanette, to tell me if I'm going to, I've taken too long, but I wanted to quickly mention this as part of a guidance that I think is a terrific resource. It was developed by the Resilience Shift in partnership with ICSI and delivered by Arab colleagues. And this is one of the guidances, I should say, is the guidance of guidance for focusing on climate resilient infrastructure. And it uses a life cycle of infrastructure to collate, link, organize, and explain all the existing guidance on climate resilient infrastructure. And by using the life cycle, it really creates connections across the different stages and across different practitioners that need to be taking action at each stage. So I'm thinking about engineers, and there's a way to filter out what engineers need to be doing at each stage. And it's important to note that even though, I mean, you might think that design, procurement, construction, operation, and maintenance and end of life is where we kind of need to focus our efforts, there are other things that we should be doing upstream. And this guidance is a great way to kind of flag what else engineers should be thinking about. So please take a look. And this is one of the example of what it looks like. I don't have time to go into detail of this, but please take a look. Another thing that we're doing in partnership with the Institution of Civil Engineers is the new Brunel lecture. And we're doing this lecture series now. Rather than having one single lecture, we have 9 different lectures in 9 different regions. And the theme of this year's lecture series is the challenges to implementing equitable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure is fit for people and planet, and how the engineering community need to come to the table with policy makers in each region to tackle these challenges. And so there will be a lecture, but then before the lecture will be a round table. And in each region, we will convene policymakers and engineers. And at each lecture, we will try and get a policymaker to give a keynote to really kind of communicate to the engineering community what the challenges that they're facing in their own regions, and then, you know, discuss how engineers might help. And that's my last slide. Going back to the 3 inspiring words of the new Bauhaus initiative. Sometimes we kind of need to imagine where we want to get to. We need to imagine our future, and engineers are not best known perhaps for being imaginative and creative, and that's where we need to get to, I think, if we really want to turn it into a reality. And I was fortunate enough to be at COP last year, and I wasn't in the same room as David Attenborough, but I definitely, you know, listened to his speech. And this is something that I think really resonated with me, because we as engineers are seen as problem solvers, and so that resonated with me, saying that if we're working apart, we're forces powerful enough to destabilize our planet, but then together we're powerful enough to save it. So I think that's an inspiring note to end to, and yeah, that's me. And thank you, Janet.
Thank you so much. I indeed am feeling very inspired now with these last words. Very powerful indeed. On that note, may I please introduce Dr. Nikos Lagaros, who is the Dean at the School of Civil Engineering and Professor of Structural Optimization at the Institute of Structural Analysis and Anti-Seismic Research of the National Technical University of Athens. He will be speaking to us today about the design of structures and essentially the integration of these structures with sustainability, touching upon automated procedures used in academia and hopefully how these will be adopted in the industry shortly. Thank you for joining us today, Professor Lagaros. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Janet. Let me share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Dear President, dear colleagues, good evening to everyone. With my lecture, I aim to present some of the benefits that can be delivered through adopting optimization-based design procedures and how can contribute on the reduction of the environmental impact of the construction industry. According to the well-known mathematician Leonhard Euler, nothing takes place within the universe in which the rule of maximum or minimum does not appear. Thus, a question might arise: is it worth performing structural optimization studies for assisting the construction industry towards a sustainable new era? Designing of structures refers to a multidisciplinary problem where compromise solutions should be delivered. Disciplines ranging from the structural performance, fire safety, acoustic performance, to reduce demands of energy and CO2 emissions need to be considered. The successful design and construction of the first light globe by Thomas Edison was the result of a long and effortful trial and error procedure. Although Edison had no basic knowledge on the way different materials resist on electric current, today's engineers are commonly armed with significant knowledge concerning their fields. This enables them to generate good designs based on intuition before testing them. Based on the advances on computer-aided engineering, such trial and error procedures rely on virtual prototyping. However, the potential of virtual prototyping concept remains restricted by two factors. In every iteration, an engineer is needed to manually develop the computer model, while the success of this concept still depends on the restrictions of the human intuition and skills. The Latin word optimum means ideal, and optimus means the best. Therefore, to optimize refers to try to bring something closer to its ultimate state. The history of optimization dates back several years, several hundreds of years, during which remarkable progress has been made in developing new and more efficient methods. The development of optimization algorithms can be traced back to the days of Kepler, Newton, Lagrange, and Cauchy, and recently to Dantzig, Kuhn, and von Neumann. The term structural optimization refers to the application of numerical optimization to the design process of structures like buildings, automotives, or aircrafts. The development of the finite element method was the reason for the dominance of computerized structural analysis design processes that allowed the application of finite element-based numerical optimization procedures to structures. Schmidt, in his pioneering work, presented the first application where a simple three-bar truss structure was used to present the idea of structural synthesis. Here we can see a typical optimization problem that can be mathematically expressed with this formula. There is a criterion, an objective function, to be optimized, either minimized or maximized, a function of unknowns, the design variables, subject to constraints. This problem is solved through an automated iterative process. Although in early 60s, a large amount of excellent research studies has been published related to optimization-based structural engineering, where structural optimization was successfully been applied to various problems, ranging from pre-stressed concrete beams, wind towers to optimization-driven architectural design. However, structural engineering practice falls short behind of adopting optimization-based design procedures. On the other hand, other engineering professions like mechanical and aerospace engineering implement optimization procedures in the everyday professional practice. For example, in automotive industry, among other car manufacturers, the R&D department of Renault has developed standardized optimization procedures in the framework of various fields of simulations when developing a new car. You see here a car and how initial design through an optimization process leads to the optimized design. Additionally, in aeronautic industry, Airbus adopted an optimization-based procedure for designing the wing of aircraft A380. This is part of the wing that was designed through such a process. Generally speaking, there are three classes of structural optimization problems: sizing, shape, and topology. In sizing optimization problems, the aim is usually to minimize the weight of the structure under certain behavioral constraints, as suggested by the design codes. The design variables are the unknowns are frequently chosen to be dimensions of the cross-sections of the structural elements. While more recently, structural optimization research focused on changing the shape and topology of the structural system. In structural shape optimization problems, also associated with the term of the so-called parametric design, the aim is to improve the performance of the structure by modifying its shape. So the question is, why not the construction industry? Engineers' main objective is to design efficient structures that should be as economic and eco-friendly as possible, nevertheless strong enough to resist the foremost demanding operational requirements arising from their service life. The typical trial and error procedure that Edison has used is not appropriate to derive economical and sustainable designs, also satisfying the safety criteria. On the other hand, the main objective of structural design optimization is to efficiently handle such problems. However, the gap between the inherent value of structural optimization technology and the ability to be adopted by the construction industry still remains. This can be possibly justified due to the absence of specialized software for performing computerized design optimization studies in civil engineering. And another reason is design engineers might be skeptical on the safety of the optimization of optimized structural designs, while they might not be identify direct personal benefit from the use of such technology. However, the motivation to integrate optimization technology into the everyday practice of the construction industry, I believe, still exists. If you see around, the material requirements for buildings currently represent one of the greatest resource use challenges. Even though this consumption does not always manifest itself in a direct and observable problem, issues like biodiversity loss, climate change, soil erosion are linked to the extensive material use. In Europe, more than 30 to 50% of the total material use goes to housing. In particular, the building sector is the highest contributor to global greenhouse gas emission, 30% of the total, while it also consumes almost 40% of the global energy, 25% of global water, 40% of the global resources, while construction industry is expected to expand by 85% worldwide in 2030. The problem of extensive material use is expected to get worse, among others due to the China's booming construction industry, a growing population, as well as the rapid growth in purchasing power in emerging economies and developing countries, means that the global building floor area is expected to double by 2050, further decreasing the energy demand and the greenhouse gas emissions related to construction. This slide, you can see the projection for future material use for years 2030-2050, as derived as proportional to the building floor estimates for these years, according to the United Nations Environmental Programme. And you see how the growth of the future demand in materials goes on. In order to present the influence of design optimization procedures in the construction industry and thus the environmental benefit that we can get, we can use some scenarios. Assume that via a design optimization procedure, an average reduction on material requirements is up to 5%, while a global 0.5% of the construction industry market adopts such techniques during the design procedure. You see in this slide the benefits that are derived through the implementation of such procedures in terms of environmental and economic impact. So, a larger percentage of construction market adopts such design procedures, the more the benefit becomes. In order to underline the significance of adopting optimization procedures in the structural engineering design practice, this slide it presents the annual greenhouse emission of 24 cities around the world in million metric tons of CO2 emissions. For the scenario that on average 10% material use reduction is achieved by the 5% of the global construction industry market, and the environmental benefit corresponds to a reduction to 6 million metric tons of CO2 emissions for year 2016. That corresponds to a quantity that a city like Athens, Milan, Paris, Pittsburgh emit annually. So as to understand the benefit that we have. Given the benefit observed throughout the application of the optimization procedure into the construction industry, the question is how such technology can be integrated into the real world construction industry practice. So far, several technical offices offer value engineering services, but they basically rely on the outcome of multiple trials, the trial and error procedure, and on the experience of the engineers. Such a procedure is extremely time consuming and demands additional human resources. Also in the past, there have been unsuccessful attempts by software companies to incorporate optimization in their products addressed for civil engineers. However, major problems arose: failing to deliver constructable designs, not easy to use tools, there was absent user-friendly interface, and the achievement was of minor importance. On the other hand, there are some computer-aided structural optimization services that can be used to efficiently deliver the specific problem. Worth mentioning that there is a major difference between the construction industry and the car or aerospace industry. The subject manufactured, whether it is a car or an aircraft, is produced in multiple copies. On the contrary, every construction project is unique regarding its structural system, its foundation, and any other parameter. Furthermore, it is worth mentioning that the engineer during a design project, civil engineer, is free to introduce additional design checks in conjunction with those imposed by the design codes. So he performs additional tests using tools other than those of the basic analysis design software that he's using. For example, he might use Excel sheets or MATLAB Python scripts. He might use 2 or 3 analysis design software in order to assess the structural performance of his design. He might disregard, if needed, the results of fine elements that do not play a key role in his model. So this way that civil engineer works, design engineer, are some additional reasons why specialized software might fail. On the other hand, the computer-aided structural optimization services addressing a specific problem for real-world cases is applied through the synergy of state-of-the-art technologies like high-performance computing, artificial intelligence, and the knowledge and the background of structural optimization. The workflow of such a process should be carried out through some steps. The first one, to overview the original model provided by the design engineer, formulate the problem, parameters, restrictions, criteria, and the whole process, implement special demands by the civil engineer, by the design engineer, then execute the optimization process for calibrating the problem, and then deliver the optimization structural design at the technical study. This is how such a process can be applied. Such an automated value engineering service will provide guaranteed constructability, incorporation of additional design code safety demands, increase the productivity and mitigation of possible mistakes through an automated process. It provides exploitation of the advanced features of BIM. Also, the digitization of the information derived through the construction designs will also be taken into account. It can be adapted also to cover all specific needs of a project, considering all personalized requirements of the design engineer, while it will exploit the results of any technical software that is used. In addition, such a process will not have any restrictions in its implementation. It will handle any material, conventional or new ones, like recycled materials. It will be able to integrate any construction practice, formworks, precast, or even 3D printing. It will be able to be used for designing any type of constructions, building bridges, wind towers, and it will be applicable to any continent, to any country. As a conclusion, I will try to show some results from the industry that will show the benefits that can come from such a process. Depending on the process and what is allowed by the design engineers, optimization can be applied either on the cross-sections of the structural elements or on the structural system, on the material used, or on the structural elements, on the non-structural elements of the construction, or a combination of those. Here we can see high-rise building office, where such a process built in India, where through such a process, a reduction of almost 7% was achieved in material demands. You see the greenhouse emissions compared greenhouse emissions that were reduced compared to the emissions that Athens emit annually. And here is another building, skyscraper in the Persian Gulf area, where a reduction of 8% was achieved, and you see the corresponding reduction in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption. You realize how optimization, applied mathematics, optimization, and the engineering can contribute on sustainable design towards a sustainable new era for the construction industry. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lagaros, for that. Again, some thought-provoking things that you've mentioned there. I know that there are a few questions brewing already, but prior to going to the Q&A session, I'd like to invite Ms. Kirk for our final presentation this afternoon. So Ms. Kirk is a leader at the Arab Global within the Climate and Sustainability portfolio. She will be focusing on the practical application of how we can bring together the Bauhaus framework within the engineering context, using case studies, focusing not only on sustainability, but also the together and the beautiful, hopefully. Thank you so much for coming today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you very much for the invitation to share some material with you all today as well. Hopefully my screen will be sharing with you now. I'll just put that into presentation mode. Yeah, so again, thank you. I'm joining you from Dublin today, so a little bit behind on the time. Again, very pleased to be with you all today. So when I spoke to several colleagues around Arab to ask for some examples to include in the presentation, it was very interesting, the range of disciplines and the diversity of different types of engineers who are actually involved in working together on this. So I'm hoping to share some examples of that. We've heard already about the inclusivity and the collaboration and the networking and how that's so fundamental to the Bauhaus theory. So look forward to sharing that. For those who may not have heard of us, Arab it's an independent membership owned firm, 17,500 members at the last count, engineers, designers, working across 140 countries. And again, the basis of our organization is to be both humane and excellent, with collaboration with our clients and partners at the core of what we do. So again, very much aligned with the fundamental principles of Bauhaus as well, with the real integration of everything. Our strategy within the firm is that sustainable development is everything. So that's very much what we are focused on. And what that means for us is that the vision and the commitment that we bring is around evidence-based thinking and evidence-based design, connecting that through our foresight work to show how Europe can really achieve net zero, circular and a digital economy, putting people's well-being at the heart of everything that we do. And again, a core component of what we do in Arab and how we think that is very aligned with the Bauhaus principles is around the holistic design. And we've heard about that from our other speakers today as well, is basing that from an engineering perspective on those real world experiences. So how do we provide that systematic view for how buildings, transport and energy can all work together to deliver against these goals? So again, we use the European footprint of our offices, building the bridges between all those stakeholders and all those levels of government to try and bring about that innovation and that holistic thinking. Again, as an organisation, we have a deep technical expertise and experience across a broad range of disciplines, pulling together the digital domain as well to solve some of these technical challenges. The objective of all of that is obviously designing something that's beautiful, sustainable and inclusive for Europe. So again, pulling these together. We do have just under 2,000 specialists within the firm in Europe. Like I said, there's more globally, 16 offices in Europe in 9 different countries. And the connection through to the Bauhaus, which you'll have seen earlier, and which I'm going to touch on today, is through the lens of enriching, kind of bringing together art, culture, and responding to the needs of the people, place, and planet beyond just the functionality of what we need to design. I will focus on some examples around sustainability, how we're designing in harmony with nature, with the environment and the planet. And then 1 or 2 examples about inclusive design. Again, around the concept of encouraging dialogue across cultures, disciplines, genders, and ages. So the first theme to touch on is enriching. And this is something that we're incorporating into more and more of the projects that we work on, this umbrella concept of nature-based solutions. So it's right at the outset of any project. And I loved Savina's example of do the right project and do the project right. It's very much where our thinking is as well in terms of what we need to work on. And then how can we do the project right? Can we incorporate biodiversity? You know, is there a connection through to forests, land use, forestry, water, agriculture, climate change adaptation, and again, disaster risk reduction? How do these concepts potentially come together under that umbrella of nature-based solutions? And how can we encompass those in terms of the design to make sure that we are designing for resilience to the climate changes that we're seeing? One example I wanted to highlight is work that we've done with a group called the C40, which is an organization, a global organization of just under 100 city mayors who are focused on taking action to address climate change. And working with them, we've produced, and a lot of these documents are actually available on the website if anyone does want to download and view them. It's a green and thriving neighborhoods. And again, this is a model for low carbon urban development, very much human in scale, kind of thriving from an economic perspective and inclusive for our future. So this guidebook is for cities, national governments, private sector and developers, as well as residents and communities. It sets out a framework of approaches for how they can develop net zero, people-centered neighborhoods, really showcasing the future that we want to see going forward. And again, just touching on the inclusive part as well, there was very proactive citizen participation and looking about how to test new technologies to make that work as well. So the guidebook has taken 10 different approaches for how to do that. You can see them listed there. I won't run through them all. And then the pathways to activate and download, outline those approaches as well are there. So there's more information on how to do that. Again, it was the holistic and the systems thinking to pull all of those together. Another example is some of the work that's underway with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. They are funding a series of green city action plans across the region. We've been working with them for the last 5 years across a number of cities. And the one to touch on today is in Tirana. This is essentially the EBRD, as you may know, have got some very ambitious targets around their investments supporting carbon reduction in the projects. And they also have a requirement that all of their invested projects are Paris aligned, so aligned to the Paris Agreement. So again, being able to demonstrate and illustrate the sustainability components of what those projects can achieve is a core requirement to access the funding. One of the projects that we've worked on is Tirana Orbital Forest. So this is looking at addressing the need to green the city of Tirana in response to issues that they're experiencing, such as poor air quality, flooding, and excess urban heat. So the proposal that we've been working on with them is around the planting of a new orbital forest the whole way around the city. So this is looking at an investment into the green infrastructure in order to respond to all of those challenges. This is a clear example of a nature-based solution for resilience. So this is a proposed ring around the urban perimeter of the city, mix of forest, shrubland, agricultural land, and various recreational areas. So this is looking to protect some of those existing landscapes, very much connecting people to ecology, so touching on that inclusive point, looking to restore some of the degraded landscapes and habitats. And I'll touch on a little bit later about the need for regenerative design as well to move beyond just net zero, and providing places for people as well. So again, bringing together the sustainable and the inclusivity. Another example of this is the New Island and the metro connection in Copenhagen. So a proposal to build a new island for 35,000 people. This is also to protect the city from rising sea levels. A new metro connection, obviously requiring new infrastructure to connect in with the existing networks and infrastructure within the city as well. So again, where we started with this project was to bring the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, into the heart of the design process. So really at the very, very beginning, thinking about that as the core principle and driver for our design thinking. And we started to think about the carbon. So how can we actually design with carbon in mind? We found that when we did this and incorporated this into our digital workflows as well, it made the engineers think differently about the material use. This helped us come up with new solutions about what materials and what components to use and how to use them. Some of the guidance that we used for this is in the Carbon Management and Infrastructure, PAS 2080, which you may be familiar with. And again, using a lot of that to guide and to help with the analytical models. So what we started to look at was kind of engineering and rethinking the materials around timber. So timber stations, the use of timber as a primary structural material for these elevated stations. We looked at that clearly from the carbon perspective, and we identified that we could achieve up to 50% savings for embodied carbon compared to the standard concrete station. We also looked at timber materials for the viaducts as well, and what that could mean in terms of the structural system capacities, durability, deflection limitations, and lots of different issues around fire safety. And some very interesting conversations around kind of with the fire engineers about how to make sure that the materials can be properly meet codes, and that there's no unintended consequences in terms of fire risk. Again, carbon calculations for the viaducts as well identified clearly that we could have additional 50% embodied carbon savings compared to the standard concrete. Another interesting project that we've worked on, which I think is a fantastic project going forward, is the Ørsted offshore wind farm in the North Sea. This has been developed with the government in Denmark, and they're actually looking to build the world's first artificial island to harvest sustainable wind energy potential in the North Sea. To do this, the wind farm would require a new island to be built. Arup have been working with them, and again, thinking about sustainability from the outset. We asked the question about, if we're going to build a new structure in the sea, how do we take account of kind of broad sustainability issues? Back to that kind of my first slide with biodiversity, and looking at all the nature components and the climate risk. So we were asked, we kind of scoped out what the systems that could leverage the island's infrastructure design for different habitats. How could this actually support biodiversity? and then how could that happen at different levels that the island would go to. So we looked at all of those different options in terms of how that was engineered. We looked at kind of how we could, the materials that we could use, cave structures there for refuge, for biodiversity, what type of corals and plants to attach to those in terms of making sure that they had the stability that were needed. And then looking at the kind of making these safe for migrating birds and apparently the local bat populations as well. So again, that diversity of integrated systems thinking to come up with something quite innovative and practical. Something that we showcased at COP26 last year as part of the Build Better Now exhibition was one of it's a circular timber bridge design. And again, this is looking at the idea of different materials, incorporating circular economy principles and thinking into the design and looking at renewable materials. How could that be built? What would the modular components of that be? And how can we incorporate reuse into those as well? This was mentioned, I think Sabina mentioned this earlier as well, as the should we do the project. And one of the other projects we've worked on is around extending lifespans of aging infrastructure. This is a challenge that we're seeing in many developed countries, and certainly something we're seeing across Europe as well, where the assets are coming under intense pressure as they reach the end of life, end of service, and with rising traffic volumes as well. So we worked with Rijkswaterstaat as part of a joint venture, and we looked at strengthening the design and engineering solutions for the National Bridge Repair Programme. And again, this is very much about going one step further to incorporate and embrace the circular economy principles into any of the design and upgrades to these, as well as extending the lifetime of those bridges by another 100 years. So that reduces the need for any new build, significantly reduces the additional embodied carbon that would come from that and the additional resource use that would come from it. So again, touching very much on that sustainability perspective. And the third theme that we have is around inclusion. So this is something very much at the heart of what ARB believes, is that co-creation is a process for enduring and systematic change. And that if we can create that properly in communities, that will result in improved quality of life for individuals. So how do we incorporate that into projects? Again, interesting to see the stakeholder consultation high up on the list of what engineers perceive that they have strength in already. So we're definitely seeing that across our engineers as well. We worked on a really nice project in Ankara in Turkey, which was about healthy streets. This was about designing a city for everyone. So making sure that sustainability and inclusion were at the heart of this redesign of downtown Ankara. How did we do this? There was those extensive, very extensive consultation and engagement. I think there were over 400 workshops held with different residents groups, community groups, local businesses. This was all done over the last 2 years. So a lot of these, you can see some of them here were done in person. A huge amount were done online as well. And this collaboration definitely led to quite different outcomes. And there was a huge amount that we learned from the process in terms of what the local communities needed and what they wanted. And the sense of ownership that has come from this project at the end has been absolutely fantastic. So again, using the UN SDGs as the kind of the initial starting point for how to design and how to start thinking about this design. The gender equality and social inclusion was another key issue that we were incorporating right from the outset of this as well. Another project in Milan. So this was about Milan's first play street. And we've done some interesting work around child-centered play and making sure that streets are safe for children to play in, to be able to access, to be able to actually use them. You can see here the workshops that were actually held with the children, including them in the design as part of that process. You can probably identify some of the the Lego that they used as well to engineer some of the solutions that they felt that they needed and that they wanted to see. So some of the other work as well around kind of the participatory processes of how that engagement happens. How do you identify what's needed for a neighborhood and set that essentially as your design brief for how to redesign infrastructure and redesign the roads and streets and the landscape and the urban realm within a neighborhood, within a city. So the community engagement as part of that process was a key component to set things off. And again, understanding the guidelines that were prepared to increase the role and the value of play for children in the community, really making sure that inclusivity was a core component of that whole design. And finally, just to touch on those, a report that we produced recently with Transport Infrastructure Ireland, based here in Dublin. And this one was quite interesting. It was called Travelling in a Woman's Shoes. The report was commissioned to really bring to life the experiences and through real data, real life stories about equal access to public infrastructure and understanding how can we create a more equitable travel experience. This report, when it came out, there was mixed reaction to it, which again was quite interesting. But again, something that I learned a lot from, which I didn't expect to do. I thought as a woman, I understood what it meant to travel and to use public transport. But so it's like many things when you actually shine a spotlight on this. You think about things such as the lighting around bus stops and how people actually access bus stops or train stations and how that can put off certain people from using them. So again, very interesting study with very useful insights in terms of what we need to think about in terms of ensuring that we can design for a very equitable and a very fair society. So that's it from me. Again, like I said, these reports and the others are available on the website if you did want to find out any more or to learn more about these. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We can see even from the few projects that you've presented, the range of involvement in infrastructure projects and how engineers can interact with other professions in getting these projects to life. We already have a few questions, some of them very interesting. Before delving into those, I'd like to invite the ECE executive board members to the panel. Joining us today, there is Andreas, who you have already met. There is Aris Katsidakis, past president of ECE, and Platonas Stylianou, who is the vice president and president-elect, and Paul Cullen, who is an executive board member. Thank you so much for joining us today. So delving right in, one of the first questions that we received was for Dr. Lagaros. And the question is, how would you address the risk of AI-backed potential wrongful design and the entailed liability for a structurally optimized design? Infrastructure are highly prototypical. So I guess the question is, what happens if an AI-produced design makes a mistake of some sort? What happens in terms of liability?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Of course, the tools that were presented in my lecture, artificial intelligence and applied mathematics, goes together with the engineers. So any mistakes that might such a tool deliver, there's an engineer that should be that will resolve this mistake that was delivered by the tool. And these tools will not remove the presence of the engineers from our projects.
Yes, so the human will always be quite an important role, even in the future
Exactly.
of AI. I wonder, there was Andreas there who would like to give us some thoughts about this. You had a hand up.
Yes, I think it's quite clear. The liability lies with the engineer using the artificial intelligence tools. I think that's the main problem occurring now, is that we need, on one hand, specialists, but those specialists should have wide knowledge so that they are able to qualify if the result which they get from artificial intelligence tool might be realistic. That's the main problem I see with young engineers coming from universities, that they can use the tools, but they are not able to qualify if the result is correct or not. And this is a thing we have to tackle with, and we have to work on this, I think, together with academia, to get a solution which works in the future.
Of course, because there's always two sides of the story. There is the young generation who just come out fresh out of university, and then, as Ms. Carluccia has mentioned, there is the upskilling that is required for the existing cohort of engineers that need, continual development in this, and possibly, yes, bridging into understanding AI and other techniques and tools which develop in time. Very good. So I was wondering whether we could pass on to the next question. This is from Justin Zarb, and this is a question to all the speakers. The building in this engineering industry is going through an awkward phase where national forms and standards have been too relaxed for years, yet clients are demanding net zero energy projects to meet their climate commitments. How can the new European Bauhaus help engineers catch up after 2 decades of business as usual? And I'd like to complement this with the reverse question, because I think it's also an issue in some countries where engineers want to design sustainably and with sustainable values, and clients are still unhappy to provide the investment for it. So perhaps, if I may, Ms. Kirk, from your experience in the projects that you've mentioned, how do you reconcile these two very important parts of the equation?
It's a great question. I would definitely agree that it varies by country and it varies by industry. So a lot of the projects that I shared today are actually where you've got quite innovative and pioneering clients who are keen to push the agenda forward and who are asking for this. And for example, the EBRD have a very clear policy and ambitious framework to do this work and to really focus and push for net zero. So they're driving that change. The metro that I talked about in Copenhagen, again, they have very, very ambitious targets for use of public transport and for decarbonization there as well. So you can see the national influence in terms of being a major driver for that. I would say, I would question whether it's kind of so far behind. We're definitely seeing huge amounts of activity where engineers are really kind of stepping up and being innovative in their thinking. And I think what the new European Bauhaus does is really encourages that integrated and systematic thinking from the outset. That certainly in my experience over the last 20 years has really been the key to unlocking how we think differently. And we've seen some fantastic examples of how we can achieve innovation, achieve savings, get to net zero quicker, thinking about timber as a we've done some high-rise buildings in the Netherlands with timber structures, which just would not have been done before. So this inclusive, sustainable thinking can really help to come up with some of those solutions.
Yes, I mean, I come from a context where unfortunately we're more of the latter, that clients would not like to invest yet, and we're finding ways of incentivizing them to become more conscious of their corporate footprint. Yes, Miss Carluccio.
Just building on what Paula just said, wholeheartedly agree. In the education of clients, if I might say this, the telling the innovative, successful stories plays such a big part. And I think looking at the Bauhaus website, I was just browsing, and they do have a database of inspirational projects. So now they don't have probably the types of project that Paula presented, but that would be a great way to really inspire and empower, I think, people to do things differently, to think differently, and then back to my do the right project, get in there upstream. Sometimes clients, I think, like you kind of need to help them ask the right questions, and they might have not thought about it. So I don't want to be sounding patronizing about educating clients, but I think, like having those earlier conversations, and that would make them ask the right questions. And so when you then suddenly ask the right question, then you can come up with an innovative, creative, different solution.
Yes, I wonder from your points of view, Aris and Platonas, what is your experience with that in the understanding of clients, and how do you manage that in your part of the world?
We share the same problem with you, Janet. Clients do not want to invest, but innovative solution at the end of the story always give something better to the world, give something better to them, but they are reluctant at the beginning to understand the importance of this innovative solution, of this sustainable solution. And you need time and effort to explain them, convince them, make them sure that they will gain at the end of the story much more than of what they think. And we share the same difficulties, but at the end of the story, it's up to the engineer and up to the standard that we use to explain them and introduce them the new story that is coming through the EU, and the sustainability issues, the resilience, and all of this era that is coming, and something that we'll have to deal with.
Yes, it's a conversation that is a difficult one to start. Yes, sorry.
Janet, the big problem is that, let's say, public authorities should lead this effort, and this is not a reality. I think that even the simplest, let's say, procedure, having architectural competitions on important projects is not something that really is adopted by public authorities. So it would be so easy trying to find innovative solutions just to give a competition in each, let's say, lead project. But this does not happen. And it is up to the public authorities to open the way, in my opinion, so that private, let's say, investors would, let's say, follow what will happen if they see they really can have a very successful design, and let's say something that would be even, let's say, an enterprise success. So I think that it's up to the public authorities to, to show the way. As in many other, let's say, initiatives of society, we think that we have to demand much more from public authorities, and they should be the first to adopt all these ideas, because even if there is some risk in some new ideas, it is up to the, to the collective, let's say, community to face the danger, not the private enterprise to be the first to lead. We have had, cases like this, but I wouldn't really, I don't envy let's say, the fate of Brunel, having done the greatest, project in his era, and then failed, corrupted with Great Britannia, etc. It's not, let's say, the most innovative engineer of England bankrupt, and he has died with nothing. So it is really a brilliant story of an engineering ideas, but it's not, let's say, an enterprise example. So I think that it's up to, we have to demand more from our public authorities, and even the, let's say, the case studies that the Bauhaus has to give to some countries to, let's say, to develop some let's say, emblematic. I think that we should demand. Like civil engineers now, we're trying to put. We don't deny that aesthetics and let's say the architecture part of Bauhaus is very interesting. We feel that it is our opinion also, but we just put some stress, some points to the structural, let's say, that structural safety is sustainability, is resilience, is some of the first, let's say, demands for a holistic approach. So I think that we as civil engineers could demand one, let's say, lead initiative for Bauhaus, including some structural aspects and the, let's say, the need to see how we can reuse existing assets, which is, I think it's one way. We cannot just leave them, let's say, die. We have to reuse all these assets, infrastructure and buildings, but we have to do it in an innovative way. And this could be one of the lead initiatives of Bauhaus, trying to find the, let's say, some of the best practices to that. So I'm sorry, because we come from a whole day seminar, that's why I'm in Cyprus, and maybe we're not so clear-minded now at this hour, but I think that this could be something for civil engineers to demand, that some of the lead initiatives for Bauhaus, let's say, projects could be include structural, let's say, aspects and the best practices of rehabilitation or reusing, refurbishing, renovating, whatever. And this maybe we have tried to Brussels, Andreas, to convince and try to influence, let's say, that some project could be awarded with including this kind of criteria. So
thank you, Aris. I believe that even
let me just add something. We have
yes, of course.
Our 3S approach. The 3S approach is safe, sound, and sustainable. So safety comes first. It's either on buildings or infrastructure, and that means on all projects. Resilience, durability, on all aspects of all these things that we are discussing about the Bauhaus. Our 3S approach that we have created for ECHE can be adopted on that, can be implemented on that. And we always have to remember as engineers that either innovative or not, which we prefer innovative, of course, but safety should come first. And that is the 3S approach. And that should lead us and guide us on every project that we need to be involved.
Of course, innovation is not limited by whatever is safe, you know, so yes. And I'm aware that Paul, you wanted to intervene earlier on.
Yeah, thank you, Jeanette. Maybe just to build on some of the points that have been made, and to have a slightly upbeat aspect to the conversation. I absolutely get and understand the frustration with the institutional inertia we can all see around us on a day-to-day basis. But I think we can also see, and I thought it was very, very well articulated by the speakers, that progress is being made, that things are changing. I think Europe has a particular advantage in having an certainly a policy and regulatory framework which is getting stronger through the leadership of the European Union. And you know, private and public sector are increasingly embracing net zero, circular economy principles, etc. But what's missing in a lot of these things, to come back to some of the points made by Aris and Platinas, is the technical know-how to deliver these ambitions. And this is where engineers come in. And this really is my point. I think even in these public institutions that are somewhat slow to engage, there are civil engineers. Civil engineers are working in these institutions. They have not just technical roles, but also professional roles, administrative roles, even political leadership roles. So I think we can also think about the responsibility that the profession has to advance this agenda. There are many people on this call who are leaders and of member organizations of engineers across Europe. And I think it's you know, what we should be really looking to do is to have a call to arms for civil engineering as a profession to influence more positively. We need to tackle this change agenda from a whole series of different angles. So my message is let's get engineers as a profession mobilized across all of the different points of influence that they have, and I think that will help us along the way. Thank you.
I completely agree. I think a one-pronged approach is definitely not the way forward. We need to understand the situation and sort of attack it from different points of view. We have a few more questions. We'll have one for you, Savina, from Dieter Moore. He says, nice presentation, especially the topic about standards. You said more or less, we can't wait for changes of the norms. Crazy situation at the moment with photovoltaic installations. It's more or less blocked in Europe if you like to go for facade systems because all photovoltaic panels have some flammable foils, but you can still install laminated safety glass, which consists also burning loads with PVB foils. Any idea how to solve it?
Okay, so a couple of things. One is, yes, I did say we cannot wait for the changes of the norms and we need to challenge them. I should have caveated not to at the expense of safety. I should have said that, but anyway, I'll say that now. But that doesn't mean that we can't challenge it, right? I think I don't have the technical answer, I suppose, you know, related to photovoltaic panels, but I do. And building on what Paul just said, that again, completely agree with. We can mobilize, rather than taking a passive role, we can mobilize and we can just form pressure groups, say, you know, like engineers in manufacturers. That's where we kind of academia. We need to mobilize and we need to be as collaborative, more collaborative than ever before, you know, that to just really go for you know, kind of break the silos, you know, like break the bottlenecks, in this case, you know, the specific standard. So I think that's the way to go to unlock the situation. And we've got this much more in our hands than we think. And so that's the point that I think Paul was making. Completely agree. So there are so many different levels where we can influence. So here's one. We need to also influence upwards. We need to lobby government at high level. This is one of the initiatives that we have. I haven't had the time to talk about, but you know, even lobby the G7, G20, the UN agency. You know, engineers can find their voice, and they should to solve all of these bottlenecks and to kind of create the change.
Yes, and indeed it ties in even with what we're saying before. There needs to be a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach, and they all need to be happening simultaneously, and hopefully we can meet somewhere in the middle with that.
And in the organizations that are represented on the call, you know, they are very much, you know, like the ones that can take an initiative. You know, we've got the right people in the room, so I think it's so it's great to have this conversation, and we can also then take action as a result, I think.
Brilliant. We have another one for you, Paula, from Dieter as well. And the question goes, how do you manage the internal knowledge for your engineers as the Global Climate and Sustainability Services leader at Arup. Do you have any kind of database of solutions, products, or services where your team and your clients could benefit from? For example, the topic you mentioned, rethinking material.
The short answer is yes. We have a huge database within Arup of all of those. What we're looking to do at the minute is really make it as accessible as possible. And it's again to the point of thinking differently. What we traditionally had was project sheets. So we describe each project and we say what we did. What we're now adding to all of those is why did we do it? What was the initial problem? Why did we think that this was the right solution? And then what were the outcomes that we achieved from that? So by reframing it with those three questions, it's really helping think about how can you take and transfer learning and experience from one project onto another. And so that's mainly how we're doing that. And if I might just in response also, I don't have the answer to the previous question, but just to add to what Savina said, the idea of the collaboration, I think, is fundamentally important there as well. Some of the work we've been doing around climate risk assessments is actually looking at multi-hazard assessments. So bringing together fire engineers, flooding engineers, wind engineers, seismic engineers, kind of heating engineers. These are all the climate risks that our kind of our cities, our governments, our clients are all experiencing. And getting all of those different disciplines of engineers together to work out a method of assessing those risks. How do you measure those risks? And then what do you do to take action in a very integrated way to look after property, to look after cities, to look after infrastructure as a result of that? I think that integration, I know I keep saying, but that's absolutely fundamental to finding the new solutions that we need.
Yes, and indeed, I think it's not only engineers within themselves. It's as Savina mentioned earlier, it's the systems of systems thinking. So if each engineer is taking care of a system, so to speak, then there needs to be an overall system that governs all of what's happening, as well as the fact that most of the project that you've mentioned require other skills, such as social sciences, to understand human behavior, geology. So the web is much more complex, and I think engineers need to be at the forefront of this team, whatever the team is, to be able to make a successful project. We have another question from Ireland. Kurt Mert has asked, I presume it is Dr. Lagaros, how would you propose to use optimization to produce affordable housing?
Thank you for the question. It depends how the problem will be formulated. It can be formulated as a problem where the budget for the construction is the target to be optimized. So in that way, we can formulate and deliver a design that will cover this aspect. Affordable housing. Also, as mentioned earlier, recycled materials can also be used in the design process of an optimization-based procedure. So recycled materials can also contribute in this aspect, affordable housing. And also, I would like to add something on the subject that was discussed earlier. Indeed, construction industry operates, most of the construction industry operates in the same way that it used to be 20 years ago. There's a reason for this. There's no motivation, there's no benefit for changing. So someone needs to provide those that participate in this procedure, the senior engineers, the companies, and motivation. It was mentioned by Platonas that safety comes first. Safety can also be combined with sustainability. How it will be obliged someone to to deliver a design integrating safety and sustainability. If this is imposed by the design codes, the design engineer should need to deliver a design combining safety and sustainability. So this feature, sustainability, should be implemented also in the design codes. This is how we design, this is how we operate as civil engineers. So I think very crucial integrating this feature in the design codes. Thank you.
Andreas, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yes, I just wanted to say, I think we don't have to put everything in the design codes. I think it's an engineering task that you look at a problem in a holistic way. A good engineer, that's daily life. Yeah. So the standards now, which are made by the CEN, mostly tend into the direction that you use it like a recipe for cooking something. No, just making your ticking it and then it's gone. No, that's not the way an engineer should work. It should be a standard from my point of view, and I'm working in several standardization committees, should be thinking as an engineer, thinking holistic, trying to grasp the problem with a wide view, and then start to find the solution with others, with other stakeholders, with other engineers, so that you can find a sustainable, resilient, and safe solution.
Yes,
And
I don't
we
think
cannot. You are right, Sabina, when you say we can't wait for the standards. You know, that it takes at least 3 years to create a new standard, or to even to change it. That's the normal way how it runs. Yeah. So we have to work. We have to think as an engineer.
exactly. Thinking as an engineer is what we should be training for. We should not be always banking on the fact that there's a regulation that will tell us what to do. So the engineering judgment, the understanding of how things are to be done, it's almost an innate to the profession. We have another interesting question from Austria. Hannes is asking the speakers their opinion on how to make the principles of the new European Bauhaus standardized, how to bring best practice solutions into a broad market by replicating them. What do you think? I don't know, Sabina or Paula would like to take the microphone?
Go first. So not sure standard design, how you can standardize something like this. You know, I thought it was extremely creative in the way it was put together as a concept. So I don't think you can really have one size fit all type of thing. And probably that wasn't really where the question was going. There is something in the putting to the fore, kind of bubbling up to the top of what really makes a difference in terms of a solution that then can be replicated and scaled up. And this is not something that I think the European Commission or Union can do, without the input from the engineering community in terms of the solutions, right, that have worked. And so that's where my point about that's where we can inject, right, some engineering thinking into this, because if you look at the projects that have been put forward as inspirational, which totally are, but sometimes like you really need to just bring it down to kind of the more tangible solutions. And I think what Paula presented is great. That kind of really tells the whole story on that, how things can be approached differently and can be like, so as an inspiration to others. The other thing is I was wondering whether as a result or as a next step of something, a discussion like this, perhaps ECHI could think about talking to the people who are responsible for the new Bauhaus initiative and thinking about how the engineers can make the contributions? What can we add to the data, even to that database? It's something practical and it's something so powerful.
Yes, I think other than standards, I like the idea of the ICE of the design champion role. And I believe that they are advocating for this role to be created such that this entity will be able to make sure that every infrastructure project have been designed for 4 pillars or principles. They quote climate, people, places, and value. And rather than having a standard to which everything is designed, having a target set standard that you need to achieve. So if your project does not achieve anything to do with people, planet, and they don't satisfy values, then obviously they are not up to par. So maybe rather than really regulating a standard, it needs to be something, the outcomes. I think it was, Paula, you've mentioned the outcomes of the results in one of, no, sorry, I think it was Safina, apologies, that one of the outcomes was, to understand what the outcomes are going to be of a project, to be able to proceed from there. Paula, from your end, how do you think this can be thought of?
In a sense, I think we just need to standardize the mindset that the Bauhaus can help bring about. And again, it is that idea of what the value stories are. So being able to share more value stories of why it's beneficial to put this thinking into practice. Again, rewriting the kind of the baseline for costs so that these aren't seen as additional costs. These are seen as kind of the value that are brought to initiatives. And we're definitely seeing more, like through the EU taxonomy, the disclosures that are going to be required through that, the ability to access finance, also being kind of, including requirements to be able to demonstrate and illustrate broad sustainability or net zero components or reduction of climate risk. So these regulations and these requirements, there's some are voluntary at the minute, but they will be becoming mandatory. So I think being able to articulate those value stories with a rewritten baseline of what this is going to cost, it may not standardize it, but if we can get the mindset right to think in that way from the outset, I think it'll go a long way.
Yes, brilliant. I am mindful of time and we have a few more questions. I would like to invite Dennis to the microphone. He'd like to ask a few questions to our panelists.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Hi, Dennis, yes.
Congratulations to all the speakers. So I'm a faculty in the United States at the University of Nevada, Reno. So my expertise is mainly natural hazards, but I found this workshop very interesting. So I have a question for Professor Lagaros first. I did see he mentioned structural optimization, which I find quite interesting. One of the things we have, for example, in the US is that we have a lot of tall buildings, let's say in San Francisco and California, and we also have tall buildings in New York and Miami. Depending on the location that your tall building is, different natural hazards are governing the design. And so, for example, in San Francisco, it is the seismic hazard. In Miami, it's the wind. So my question for Professor Lagaros is, how easy it would be to adjust the AI methods and the structural optimization that he's using for different hazards so that we can make it applicable worldwide and even multi-hazard scenarios? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Strate. Thank you for the question. This is where the beauty of structural optimization is hiding. It is a mathematical procedure that is combined with engineering. So in this combination, any type of hazard can be integrated. So either earthquake or flooding or wind hazard can also be integrated depending on the location of the structure.
Okay, that's great, because this is, as I said, it's hard to find expertise among engineers that can do both, for example. So it seems that the structural optimization, your tool and the AI can actually do more than a single engineer can do, correct?
Yes, Professor Strati, optimization or artificial intelligence is not going to replace engineers. They are going to assist engineers to expand their abilities.
Great, thank you. It's clear.
This tool, they need the interventions of engineers.
I understand now. Thank you.
For being efficient.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Perhaps the final question from Peter. What is the new European Bauhaus good for? Is it a new quality standard? Is it a marketing tool? How can it help additionally with levels, European standards created by the CEN-TC 50? NEB is focused on buildings, not infrastructure. I wonder whether perhaps, I don't know, Paul, would you like to contribute to this? It's a continuation similar to what we were talking about standards earlier on. I believe that the NEB is not just focused on buildings, but it's also on larger projects, as we've seen, Paula discuss, maybe from the case studies that you've discussed, extend this to this question. I said Paula and Paul, so perhaps I'll go with Paul first.
I'm happy to make an introductory response, Jeanette, and perhaps Paula then will add to that. I think it's not so much what NEB is good for as to what we can do with NEB. I think NEB is quite a broad and inclusive concept. I think engineer and I think Savina mentioned this earlier. I think engineers need to be seen more in the NEB conversation, in the narratives around it, and to be more influential in NEB, so that we can take it in the direction that we think is the right way. So they can address all of these things in the questions. For me, it's about built environment, but it's actually about more than built environment. It's about society and the interaction of society with built environments. So. And I think that point then brings us back to a lot of the themes that have come through in this conversation, which is that engineers have to, I think, really embrace the broader conversation beyond the technical, to be influential, to collaborate more across disciplines, and to be more proactive in the overall conversation about, what we're doing to achieve some of these ambitions around net zero, regenerative design that Paula mentioned, a circular economy. So let's use NEB for what we can get out of it to achieve our ambitions around sustainability, I think, and not forgetting the aesthetics and the inclusivity as well, which is part of the concept. But Paula, happy for you to come in and add to that.
I mean, I wouldn't add too much to that, Paul. I mean, again, it's about, I would say we've used it in a way, we've used it as a tool. We've used it as a mechanism to have these conversations, to get people together. And then it's really helped a lot of our engineers understand how they can contribute, understand what their role is, and understand how they can bring parts of a solution that are going to solve some of these big challenges that we are facing around climate change, around kind of inclusive societies. So I think it's very much a case of use it to bring clarity to what those roles could be.
Yes, I think one of the key words in today's presentation is clarity. In fact, understanding how these could apply to engineers, but also another word which impacted me a lot, and it kind of went through the entire conversation, was the word collaboration and multidisciplinary collaboration. I think, Savina, you couldn't have said it in a more eloquent way, quoting David Attenborough there, that we have ruined it together by working apart. Let's try and put it together by working together. So I think that is really very apt in concluding this session today. But I'd like to ask Platona for some closing remarks, and then Andreas to close off the session for today.
Thank you, Janet. I think that was a very fruitful conversation. One final comment from my part is that we, in order to have a holistic approach, we shouldn't forget the existing building stock. We have to do the resilience and the new Bauhaus on that existing building and existing infrastructure as well. We had a seminar today in Cyprus about regular inspection of existing building, of existing infrastructure. And if we want to check the level and the quality of all this, then we will have the safety and sustainability checked and upgraded in order to have a holistic approach on all of these elements and put them together in one go.
Janet, I'd like to comment something. We have to admit that for the moment, the new Bauhaus, in the new Bauhaus idea, there are the artistic and the architectural, let's say, aspect governing. So let's say the structural aspect is not so balanced with others. So we are not against all these, let's say, ambitions of beautiful and but we have to, I think that we have to make our effort that this approach changes somehow and be more, let's say, realistic and holistic. So it's not by chance that some persons are chosen to give, let's say, the balance to the artistic side of the whole, let's say, idea, which is not, we are not against that, but it is just not, let's say, something that could stay in this level like artistic, let's say, what I have seen, maybe I'm not well informed, but the first, let's say, projects that I have seen have more artistic and architectural, let's say, content than, let's say, some part of civil, I mean, engineering is not there. Architecture is there. Artistic aspects are there, but engineering are not so present to new Bauhaus, in my opinion. So we have to stress to put the, let's say, the balance to engineering aspects also.
Thank you, Platonas. Thank you, Aris. Andreas?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Platonas. Thank you, Aris. What I took out from today's speeches and discussion, Stavina brought the topic, the complexity, and then leading to competencies and knowledges. I think that's the main point in the whole discussion. For me, the most important one. I think lifelong learning is a must for an engineer, and not only engineering or technical stuff, but also communications, mediation, something completely different from technical stuff, to be able to incorporate all stakeholders in a project and to find the right solution. Thank you also, Nikos, for your optimization. I think optimization is a vital part of all our projects, and it's a vital part to reduce carbon, to find also the right way to use the material in the most intelligent way. And Paula, thank you for your very interesting and good examples. Arup is for me a real role model, as you showed it in your presentation. Thank you once more. What should I say? I think the most important thing is we have to involve, as engineers, we have to step up. But I think the most important thing is we should tell the people the truth and not some lies that everything is 100% safe. That's not possible. So That's the fault that we did in the 70s or 80s last century, and we shouldn't do it again. We should say, okay, we can do this and that. There are remaining risks which can't be removed or only be removed with an exhaustive immense financial impact. So, but I think engineers are the problem solvers and can contribute very much to the new European Bauhaus. Thank you all for your interesting presentations. Thank you all participants for your interest and for your questions. Hope to see you again, and we will stay in contact. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Yeah.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Janet and Maria.
Sabina, may
Thank
I
you.
contact you personally?
Please, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
I will. You will hear from me.
Of
Because
course.
I'm very
Yeah.
much interested in your topic and partly also working on those topics as well.
Thank you. So yes, of course.
Yeah.
Should I send you my email maybe in the chat?
Yeah, please do so.
Yep.
Thank you. No, I have it already.
You
I
do?
think
Oh, of
you-
course. Yeah, you were on the same email chain,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Perfect.
That's
Thank you.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
All right. Nice seeing you
Bye-bye.
all.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Maria, for the good work in the background.